Welcome to Genesis Apologetics. Our mission is to reveal God's truth about creation to as many students as possible. Students today are saturated by the world with the idea of evolution over millions of years. The Bible presents a much different history of Earth and everything in it. Most students today, even many Christian students, have no idea that the Genesis account is real history, including creation spoken into existence by God only recently, dinosaurs living with man, and a catastrophic worldwide flood. When students understand these truths, it helps them build their lives on God's Word, because it's true, both theologically and historically.
What is Genesis apologetics? For that matter, what is apologetics? Apologetics is not apologizing. It's not saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that thing. Rather, apologetics is saying things you should be ashamed of, but aren't. Apologists are defenders of the faith, who make up whatever excuse is necessary to rationalize or justify every instance where their religious doctrine is inadequate, inconsistent, immoral, or factually false, or to simply obfuscate, distort, dismiss, and ignore all the evidence against said doctrine. In other words, apologists are professional liars. Genesis apologetics is a science denial campaign by religious extremist young earth creationists attempting to defend a literal interpretation of Genesis as history, which we know it can't be, along with all the impossible absurdity therein. They are a pseudoscience ministry determined to mislead and deceive children of all ages.
For K-8 students, we have The Zone. Just sign up on our Student Zone page for free videos and curriculum.
As you saw earlier in the series, they have a program called The Zone, wherein a live-action Barney Rubble pretends to be a science teacher, but he's really an anti-science anti-teacher, in that he's actually trying to stunt the curiosity and intellectual development of elementary school children, not only by lying to them, but also by talking down to them with a patronizing tone. If children are getting their science from this guy, then they're not in grade school. They're more likely being homeschooled by fundamentalist parents who prefer fantasy to reality. And generations of this create a positive feedback loop of self-stupefaction. The apologists perpetuate that by targeting older kids, too, with their next wave of ignorance and idiocy imposed upon adolescents.
5th through 10th grade students enjoy our Debunk Evolution program, where we address the top 10 pillars of evolution taught in today's public schools.
That series is hosted by a couple of dim-witted, delusional, and unlikable teenagers in a dysfunctional high school. And probably the best thing about them is that their acting is so laughably bad. Perhaps because of that, the apologists did their next level of deception without any actors, turning instead to an uncredited and seemingly computer-automated voiceover program. If so, then this may be the first technological example of artificial ignorance.
Our Debunking the 7 Myths program is designed for students 11th grade through college. This program addresses the 7 leading myths about Genesis, creation, and the flood that are taught in today's colleges, even some Christian colleges.
In this third series, the annoyingly nasal, robotic teenager voice tries to instill irrational defenses against reason in older kids going into college. They try to defend 7 of their own myths while pretending that rejecting those myths is the real myth somehow, even though every point they attempt to make in all 3 waves of their superstitious stupor has been thoroughly debunked by scientists and philosophers over and over again. But religious delusion is unreasonable, persistent, and relentless. And having faith means never admitting when your preferred beliefs have been proven wrong, no matter how clearly inarguable that is. I've already made 3 of my own mini-series to address all 3 of their waves of assault against education and rationality. And some of you thought that when I finished that would be the end of this series as a whole. But the propaganda peddlers at Genesis Apologetics made a 4th production that needs rebutting too.
Families will enjoy watching our Genesis Impact movie before visiting natural history museums. This movie highlights a dialogue between a Christian student and a museum docent regarding the top 10 pillars of evolution featured in most museums.
They want their kids to see the movie before they learn something real, in an attempt to poison the well, to pre-confuse children with misunderstood, misrepresented, misleading misinformation, false knowledge, which is more dangerous than ignorance. It's easy enough to pour science and history and philosophy into an empty vessel and fill it with understanding, but it's impossible to fill a mind with knowledge when it is already full of shit.
Finally, over 100,000 people have downloaded our free mobile app from the Google Play or iTunes stores.
And more than 100,000 people have also seen my rebuttal of their series too, which is why I'm still doing it, at least this last one, the fourth and final one. Now, each of the previous series were already divided into independent episodes, but this one was just an hour-long video billed as a movie. Different parts talk about different things, so I've divvied it up accordingly. I've made an intro video for each of the previous miniseries, and now I'm making the intro for this one. So let's get into it. It starts with the claim that students have questions. We have answers. Yeah, but they're the wrong answers, aren't they? If they're not the real answers, then they don't count as answers at all. Genesis Apologetics is staffed by believers, not thinkers. So they don't know or won't admit the real answers to any of the questions they pretend to address. I often see the wanted pretenders pretend as if whatever bullshit excuse, fanciful fairy tale, or empty assertion they want to make up counts as an answer somehow. But if you ask how flowers grow, the answer is not that there are underground fairies pushing up the daisies. If you ask how a car runs, the answer is not because it wants to. In exactly the same way, they say that God done it using supernatural miracles, also known as magic, as if that counts as an explanation of anything, which it isn't and doesn't explain anything. You have to show that there's some truth to what you're saying, and they can't because there isn't any, because everything they want to make believe is just imaginary nonsense, just baseless assumptions asserted as if it was a matter of fact, what we would normally call a lie in any and every setting outside of religious faith. But when religion does it, then it's not called lying anymore. Instead, the lies are repackaged as revealed truth. Watch how they demonstrate that.
Does what we believe about creation or evolution even matter? Or does what we believe about our ancient past have any impact on our lives today?
He's asking if it matters whether we distinguish fact from fantasy. He's asking if it makes any difference whether we try to improve our understanding of objective reality or whether we can just make up our own subjective alternative reality. He is, I think, unwittingly admitting that he does not bow to truth as I must, because he just wants to believe what he wants to believe, regardless whether it's true or not.
Can't we just believe whatever we want and live our lives the best we can?
I have heard this admission from several believers, paraphrased in different ways. One person said, "These may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this." And another one asked, "Why can't I believe whatever I want to? Why does it have to be true before I believe it?" I would have to answer with a question. Why would you want to be convinced of something that isn't evidently true? Because that's what they want to do. That's what religious faith is all about. A couple of people have even admitted to me that they already know that what they believe is not really true, but they believe it anyway because they want to, because they like to pretend, I guess. And one woman admitted that even if she had proof that if her beliefs were wrong, that she hopes that her faith would be strong enough to keep believing even when her eyes tell her otherwise. That's what faith is, making up lies and believing them. And somehow some people enjoy that. Not me, because I'm not a pretender. Believers are called believers because they're determined to make believe things that are not evidently true nor even possible, even without any evidence, and they'll defend that belief against all evidence to the contrary. That's why I say that faith is the most dishonest and auto-deceptive position it is possible to have. The only way it could be any more dishonest is when you become an apologist. From my perspective, it doesn't matter what I would rather believe, and I can't decide to believe whatever I want to. Instead, I am compelled to consider the facts and change my minds accordingly, even if I'd rather believe something else. Any belief that requires faith should be rejected for that reason. And for me, the truth matters. The only value information can have is in however accurate you can show it to be. And if you can't show that it is accurate at all, then it has no value at all.
What about the Bible?
Fantasy, folklore, myths, and legends. Basement stacks, take the stairs.
Thank you.
Could also try children's books.
Oh, right.
How many people today will trust what it says about salvation if they believe it doesn't get the beginning correct?
Again, he's admitting that it doesn't matter to him what the truth is. All that matters is what we believe. That if you want to believe in salvation, you got to believe in creation. If you want to pretend that you won't really die, that you'll live forever in heaven with your magic imaginary friend, then you got to pretend all these other things in Genesis that we know, that all of us know, and even he knows are not really true. But he and his ilk are going to believe in all of that anyway, even when they know better.
I mean, how many pages will we have to turn in the Bible to run into truth that we can trust?
Well, I didn't get very many pages into it before I realized that the Bible is not the Word of God. It is the word of men. It's man-made mythology. This is not the wisdom of a superior being, but the ignorant bigotry of very inferior beings, often little more than superstitious savages. Everything the Bible says is either not evidently true, meaning there's nothing to imply that even could be right, or it's evidently not true, meaning that it's already been proven wrong. There isn't anything in the Bible we should trust.
You see, there's one simple question, and depending on how we answer that question, can cause our lives to hang in the balance. Where do we come from?
Like everything else this guy says or believes, this too is wrong. The faithful may waste their lives believing in nonsense that devalues the one life we really do have, longing instead for some posthumous promise that isn't real. But otherwise, they still have families and go to work and so on, living just like atheists do. And when they realize that they just can't believe all these fables anymore, then certain aspects of their lives may improve, or at least their outlook on life will improve, as well as their outlook and opinions on other people and so forth. But not enough to say that their lives hang in the balance. That is just paranoid propaganda hoping to scare you into believing, because religious belief is entirely emotional, irrational, not intellectual, and certainly not honest. That's why the creationism movement depends entirely on frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies, and that's why they're led by professional liars like this guy, Ray Comfort.
What compelling evidence is there for evolution?
I mean, we have fossils, you can see it in certain bones, like we have whales who have, I believe it's tailbones left over, or hips.
Well, I think over time, we evolved.
The apes are like, you can see them evolving to look like us.
We actually have 99% DNA shared with them.
You can look at species like green tree pythons or emerald tree boas, who both have convergent evolutions with their onogenic color changes. And they're across the world, they're completely different species, they're completely different genuses, and they both have developed similar evolutions for that.
So can you observe evolution taking place? I mean, doesn't it take millions of years?
I believe that there are actually some cases of squirrels developing resistances to certain venoms. Like
hey, sweetheart, what are you watching?
Up north developing.
It's an old video I found online. People talking about the origins of life.
No, they're not. They're talking about evolution, the scientific theory of biodiversity. The diversification of life is very different than the origin of life. Each has their own collection of mechanisms, most of which are entirely different and separate.
In what way?
Physical features.
So you think you're a talking primate?
Maybe not like right now, but like I guess in the past.
Do you really believe you're a primate? Talking primate?
Yeah, I do.
Do you think man has a common ancestor with primates?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you believe in evolution?
Yes. How sad.
Do you think...
How sad that some people are honest enough to accept reality happily? Because it's not sad at all. Or is it sad that so few people know what these words mean? Because we're not just related to primates, we are primates. We have every one of the definitive characteristics to belong to that group. But this lady thinks that people who are obviously happy and smiling while they are telling the truth, without guilt or fear, that they're secretly sad, while she has to lie to herself every day about an abusive, invisible, indomitable despot looking for reasons to torture people mercilessly forever. Because that's her God, and she thinks that's happy.
You have a common ancestor with primates?
Well, I'm not a biologist, so
what if they're right?
Super specific questions. I mean, I believe I do have a
And
common
we're
ancestor,
wrong.
yes.
You're a talking primate?
What would make you say that? What do you mean?
How closely related we are.
I don't know, it's just... Connor and I were talking about creation, and he said some things that got me thinking. I mean, the scientific evidence for evolution is pretty overwhelming. What if God used evolution?
That is what most Christians around the world believe. Many pioneers of evolutionary theory and several of its champions in science have been or still are Christians who don't believe that Christianity is necessarily wrong just because evolution is demonstrably real, even though they know and can show that creationism is definitely false.
What do you believe?
Honestly, I don't know anymore.
That's the best position to take, a neutral one. You don't have to commit to believe anything, ever. Just consider that maybe that's true and maybe it isn't, and then try to find out which one has actual factual substance to back it up, which one has at least some actual truth to it, and which one relies entirely on faith instead.
I remember I was just a little bit older than you when I had some of these same questions. I was fascinated with how we came into existence. So I studied both sides of the argument. And it all changed for me one day.
How?
There is no explanation of how in this case, because these are the first two lies of this movie. As you'll see in upcoming episodes, this woman's younger self was carefully instructed in anti-science arguments exclusively, as if she had read everything from Answers in Genesis, but never knew any real science. She didn't know both sides of this story. And she had obviously always been a creationist. That didn't change for her one day either. I know because we're about to see that one day, where she was obviously already a science-denying religious apologist long before that day began.
I went to a lecture at the Natural History Museum. There was a man there. He was giving a lecture on the evidence of human evolution.
Museum today. I encourage you to visit the exhibits that will help you visualize what we've discussed today. And these exhibits should be marked in the maps that we provided for you. First, we have a wonderful exhibit that shows that apes and humans share about 98% of their DNA. Now remember, after 6 million years, the human line diverged from chimps based on this 1 to 2% DNA difference. We also have fossil evidence of key ape to human icons. We also have the human family tree exhibit, which shows the slow progression of human evolution over millions of years. And of course, this exhibit, it proves that human evolution is a clear fact.
Believers hate being told that anything they can independently validate is a clear fact, because that means they're not allowed to pretend otherwise, to make up their own subjective, unverifiable alternative facts. The whole point of faith is to ignore every inconvenient reality in order to make believe in a preferred alternative reality.
A world of pure imagination.
Notice how the lecturer distinguishes apes from humans, even though it is now known that humans are a subset of apes. Then he says that humans and apes share 98% of our DNA, which isn't true of all apes. There are different ways to measure this, and we'll get into the particulars of that in the next episode. But by one metric, we are approximately 99% identical to chimpanzees, 98% identical to gorillas, and 97% identical to orangutans. And by this same scale, it's not surprising that we're roughly 96% identical to gibbons. Those are all different species of apes, and so are we. Apes are not a species, they're a taxonomic superfamily comprised of many species, extant and extinct. Yet a lecturer in a natural history museum somehow doesn't seem to understand that. Then it gets worse when he mentions ape-to-human icons. Why does he call them icons? Because intelligent design creationist Jonathan Wells wrote a book called Icons of Evolution, which was his admitted attempt to undermine Darwinism from within, as he put it, to misrepresent the facts and evidence as icons, merely symbols to be venerated. So, of course, the apologists are not going to use accurate scientific terms. They're going to use their own deliberately deceptive religious terms. Then he goes on to say that his exhibit proves that evolution is a clear fact. And we could say that the body of evidence shows that evolution is a fact. That's true, though it is more accurate to say that evolutionary theory includes and explains many facts. But a science teacher would know that science doesn't prove anything in the positive sense, because in formal science education, proof only exists in mathematics. So if you're going to say that this proves that, then you have to specify that you're only speaking in a colloquial sense, like by an overwhelming preponderance of evidence beyond reasonable doubt, something like that. This lecturer is supposed to be a scientist. So why is he saying things that no science instructor would ever say? Because the actor playing him is a preacher in a young earth creationist church. As you'll see in every episode of this whole series, when he's reciting his rehearsed lines, it's obvious that he doesn't understand these terms or the actual facts and concepts behind them. He may as well be reciting lines in Elvish or Klingon because he clearly has no idea what he's even saying. So, David Wilcox, you and I were on a paleontological expedition into the Badlands of Wyoming, but in your regular day job, you are also a museum docent, just like the preacher is playing in this movie, correct?
Yes, I'm a museum docent at the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University in downtown Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And did you have any comments on the comments made by this person playing a museum docent, like the way that he instructs, or just anything that he said here? How would you have done it differently, or what did you want to criticize, if you will?
The percentages of the percentages of difference between human and ape DNA, which he was trying to address in the video, it would have been better had he made it clear if he was talking about mitochondrial DNA or some other sections of the human or ape genome to come up with these percentages. It wasn't clear, and the creationist interviewer was taking advantage of that non-distinction and throwing in other percentages just to muddle the picture, and that's just not fair, and it's just not the right thing to do.
What do you want, fair or clear? They're creationists. Their job is to be unfair and to make things as muddy as possible.
I know they cheat, but as a scientist, I have to point out that they're cheating.
I was thinking, the reason I wanted to have you on here was there was a number of things that I thought you might object to, and one of the things that I saw later on in the movie, you see him giving one bit of data and then confessing to the girl talking to him, the creationist girl. He then confesses that the real information is not what he said at all. Now, I have other experts that I'm going to be talking to that are very fluent in the creationist distortions that they use for their arguments.
Okay.
I know exactly how to counter like all of that. Talking to geneticists, paleontologists, and so forth, paleoprimatologists in one case. Oh, where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So he's admitting that he's lying to her.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not the case. He didn't give false information before. He's giving false information now.
He's admitting he's giving false and partial information. I watched the I guess it's an hour and 7-minute movie or video between this between the docent and this young lady from the audience.
Okay.
But they went pretty deep into some anthropology stuff. So I didn't throughout most of what they were talking about. I understood what they were saying, but in terms of my personal experience and knowledge, I didn't have enough to really debate them back. I'd have to, research it, like that claim that some Mount St. Helens day site dated to 300,000 years ago or something. I'd have to look into that.
I wouldn't expect you to be fluent in the counter in the creationists' anti-evolution distortion arguments.
Yeah, I would.
Because they're misquoted terribly, deliberately misquoted.
That's what I figured, and
yeah,
and I remember someone coming into the museum once talking about that Mount St. Helens dating, and I told them the same thing, that I didn't know enough about what they sampled, but did they sample the wrong rock? What lab did the work? Has that work been published? What university? Yeah, what's the provenance of this?
You can't expect creationists to publish work in respected journals and such. They're about misinformation. They're about misquotation.
Mm-hmm.
Their purpose is to deceive, to make believe.
Yeah. Deceive to make believe.
When he says, now remember, after 6 million years, the human line diverged from chimps based on this 1 to 2% DNA difference. So I haven't said anything about that. So you in the video that I recorded, I haven't.
Okay.
So you're welcome to take that if you like.
Okay. So in the red is what he said?
Yes.
After 6 million years, human line diverged from chimps based on this 2%. Well, it's based on as fossil evidence as well. It's that 6 million year date is based on fossil evidence, genetic clock, and this percent DNA. So it's based on several lines of evidence.
But he's got everything backwards, doesn't he? Because he says that after 6 million years, this divergence is based on that 1 to 2%. What does it mean to say that it's after 6 million years? Then no, that's
that's misleading.
Yeah, and so he's ignoring the fact that long before the discovery of DNA, long before the observation or the ability to trace or compare genomes and all of that, we already knew. In the 19th century, they already knew that there would be this type of divergence, and they already knew that we were going to be diverged from, that our closest living relatives in the animal kingdom would be chimpanzees.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, that was
already knew that.
Yeah, Carolus Linnaeus had already written in the 18th century, 100 years before Darwin. He classified chimpanzees as a subspecies of human and said that he could not tell the difference between humans and apes. So going all the way back, 200 some odd years?
Yes.
250 years, I think it is. And then this museum docent says, well, it's based on this 1 to 2% difference. And so that they can throw out the strongest evidence there ever was for evolution and then try to quibble over an interpretation on how they count, comparable parts of the genome.
Right.
One of the other bits of projection that I noticed was when I looked up this guy, Reggie McGuire, the actor playing the docent. I recognized that he's a preacher, he's an elder in this church, and I recognized the setting of the church.
Oh.
The sanctuary that they have pictured in his website is the setting for the Natural History Museum. So they filmed the interior of their own church and called it a natural history
Called
museum.
it a natural history museum.
To further project how, science is just another religion.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't. What first? I guess the first chord that the video struck with me, even when the questioning started, it's they made the scientists look extremely arrogant, and that's just a cheap shot, and the guy didn't want to fully listen to her question, and the guy was dismissive and aloof in the beginning. Yeah, that's the first thing that struck with me.
So we haven't gotten a. Do you have any other commentary that you want to include, like what a museum docent is? Have you had similar situations to what this guy's doing, like giving lectures in a sanctuary?
I can tell you this as a museum. I have not given a lecture per se as a museum docent. What I do at the Academy of Natural Sciences is I'm in Dinosaur Hall and in the Dinosaur Prep Lab, where we are fixing fossils, taking dinosaur bones out of plaster jackets, gluing the broken pieces back together, and doing whatever repairs are necessary to preserve those dinosaur fragments. What I do is answer all of the random questions that come in about dinosaurs, fossilization, prep work, field work, educational background, what it takes to do this. I answer those questions from 3-year-olds to 99-year-olds. So I've heard all kinds of questions, and my job as a docent is to field those questions, give them an answer, and if I don't have an answer, admit that I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that seems to be this guy's job, not just to admit that he doesn't have an answer, but to confess to deceit.
Yeah,
Yeah, how I would love to get a creationist against the wall for so many things. I've always been so frustrated with that when you're trying to ask them a question, they just won't answer the question because they know they can't answer the question because they can't admit what's really going on. But then in those rare occasions when I actually do get one, like on the stand, where they're going to be forced to answer, they still don't answer. Like when Behe was on trial in Kitzmiller versus Dover, when he was on the stand, and they still couldn't get him to answer any direct question. He would flub and make excuses or whatever. You can never pin these guys down because they can't admit any critical element of their belief.
Right.
If they're forced to, they have a psychotic meltdown.
At the end, they referred to the Great Flood, and the young lady was pushing the idea of the Great Flood. And like I've said before on an earlier program of yours, the fact that there is no debris field that is traceable worldwide for a worldwide flood. I mean, something that catastrophic would have left a debris field across the planet, and that's simply not found. So that is to me, the strongest evidence that there wasn't a great flood. Certainly there were regional floods or catastrophic floods, but nothing across the world, because we would see the debris field and the mixing of biostratigraphy across the globe, all dating to a sharp age date of this flood event. Didn't happen. It's like calling a car totaled, and then you have to say, well, where's the damage? I see a loose wiper blade, but you're calling it totaled. Where's the damage?
Well put. Thank you very much.
I will say that, yeah, scientists could sometimes be a little bit more specific when they're presenting their data to the public, and sometimes the non-scientific media, like the Newsweeks and the Time magazines of the world, can make generalizations because they're trying to get a point across, and they don't have forever to do it. And sometimes they take some verbal shortcuts that creationists pick up on and try to backspin that as scientists trying to mislead folks. And where that may be the fault of the more general media trying to rush and get it out the door and get more readership.
I think you're correct. All right, David Wilcox, thank you very much. Maybe I'll see you in the field again someday.
Okay, I look forward to it.